Number 9. Underwater Stonehenge. The real Stonehenge is a stone monument of questionable origin that can be found in England, but the underwater Stonehenge is a strange monument made of stone, obviously of questionable origin. In 2007, 2 scientists discovered the structure in Lake Michigan in the United States, and they were pretty shocked to do so. It was discovered by Mark Hawley, a professor of underwater archaeology at Northwestern Michigan University College, and his colleague Brian Abbott. They were going over the lake with some sonar equipment searching for shipwrecks when they unexpectedly found the monument. It's been over a decade since the monument was found, and there's still no answers as to what it was, what it isn't, who built it, and when it was built. Researchers have been studying the monument, but the mysteries keep stacking up the more it's looked at. For example, on one of the stones that is part of the structure, there appears to be a drawing of a sort that features a mastodon. If it is real and can be verified, which it hasn't been yet, that would mean that this monument was made at least 10,000 years ago, or so they suspect. What's even more curious is that people have been sailing on Lake Michigan for hundreds of years, yet the monument was only recently discovered. Number 8. Bimini Road. Where did the famous lost city of Atlantis disappear to all those centuries ago? Some think it never existed at all, but others believe that it's out there somewhere. Could it be way out in the Bahamas? It's possible. You see, a road was discovered underwater in 1968, and people were convinced it once belonged to the ancient civilization that has been submerged. This road is located near North Bimini Island, 18 feet down, and is made of limestone blocks arranged in what appears to be a line. To us, this looks like waffles, but apparently citizens might have traveled along these mysterious stretches, which reach a half a mile. And it must have been a long, bumpy half a mile. Other speculation concluded that the road is actually a wall or what used to be one. Eventually, experts gave the Bimini Road a proper analysis and reached a surprising yet sad conclusion. Turns out what seemed like the work of humans was in fact the result of erosion. Mother Nature didn't do a bad job either, we have to say. While the mystery is solved, it opens up yet more questions about the power of our Earth to shape itself in intriguing and strangely precise ways. Number 7. Rupkund Lake Skeletons. This next story is a long-running historical mystery. Even the setting is mysterious, high up on the Himalayan mountain of Trisul in Uttarakhand state. If you made it here, you'd be 16,500 feet up, enough to make anyone lightheaded. And what makes it worse is the gruesome discovery that awaits you. Hundreds of skeletons frozen in time. The icy conditions have preserved some of the flesh, making things extra icky. Hang on a second, isn't this a video about underwater discoveries? That it is. You see, Trisul Mountain is where you'll find Rupkund Lake. When the weather gets less chilly, the water level drops, and this is when the skeletons are revealed. These human remains, mostly made up of middle-aged adults plus some elderly people, were first recorded in 1942. As for how long they've been there, well, the jury is very much still out. It wasn't until 2019 that the results of a study was published showing some basic data on the skeleton's age. Intriguingly, they come from different time periods, a whole century in some cases. Carbon dating was used to establish the essentials. Another astonishing fact is that the bodies range in terms of background. So it's safe to assume that they are travelers from all over who, for whatever reason, met their end at Rupkund Lake. These findings also meant that previous ideas about this being a specific group of people from the 9th century went out the window, or at least over the edge of a mountain. It's possible some of them are Indian troops who launched a failed invasion of Tibet back in 1841. Did the harsh conditions prove to be their undoing? Did they go for a dip and caught a cold, or worse? Explanations such as an epidemic are kind of tough to swallow. It's a pretty weird coincidence they all happen to die here. Dead men and women famously tell no tales. It's unlikely we'll discover the truth of the Rupkund Lake skeletons. There are as many as 800 of them up there, and it's not like we want to hike all that way and potentially join them. Number 6. The Whalefish. Not all whales are large. This mysterious little fish called the whalefish is pretty small in comparison to, say, a humpback or a beluga, reaching a length of nearly 16 inches. The whalefish was named as such due to its shape, and it's full of surprises as you're about to discover. Experts have been studying the whalefish since 1895, though it took well over a century to unlock its secrets. Over the years, other creatures were spotted in the deep-sea environment frequented by the whalefish. You'll see them approximately 3,280 feet down. Marine scientists also noticed a strange little life form called a tape tail in 1956. Hopefully the name is self-explanatory. The tape tail looks like it got caught up in some party streamers. Then in 1966 came the discovery of the big nose fish. Again, the appearance says it all. Do they blow their noses on seaweed? Probably best we don't think about that. These three distinct creatures seemed a million miles apart in terms of how they looked. However, as studies continued, it transpired that they were part of the same family. Come again? Mind-boggling though it may seem, the tape-tail, the big nose, and the whalefish are all connected. It's been described as a truly extraordinary example of sexual dimorphism and metamorphism. Dimorphism is when unique characteristics are displayed in each sex. All this time, the experts had been wondering why they didn't see any male whalefish, why they hadn't spotted any female big noses, and most intriguing of all, how come the tape-tails were all children? The answer was right under their nose all along. Whalefish and big-nose fish mate to produce tape-tails, who then continue the life cycle. Can you think of any other creature like this? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 5. Yonaguni Pyramid. Any kind of interesting stone structures or evidence of civilization underwater is going to draw comparisons with the legend of Atlantis. And what do you know, we're including a second entry on something that's believed to have connections to this mystical and mysterious place. Time to head to the island of Yonaguni, part of the Okinawa Prefecture in Japan. Divers visit the area to check out the pyramid that lies largely untouched below the surface. Yes, this appears to be a pyramid with parallels made between this site and other such structures around the world. We've known about the Yonaguni Pyramid since 1986 thanks to an underwater explorer who came face to face with the extensive and fascinating location. The straight lines, geometric layout, and more suggest that humans once lived in the area. At least we presume they were human. Sounds like a cue for another video. Should there have been people involved, then they lived at the tail end of the Ice Age. The presence of what look like roads, not to mention tools and steps for access, is surely outside the realms of natural processes such as erosion. We also note the pyramid appears to feature a drainage system. Who built this if not people? Sharks? Pretty sure that isn't a red herring, so to speak. While some believe the pyramid and its surroundings could be a natural feature, it's figured a civilization was at work here before the tide came in. Maybe not Atlantis, but who knows, right? If only experts could gather the government funds and resources to check out the pyramid properly. But it doesn't look like this is going to happen anytime soon, though. Why not? International tensions. The site is close to Japan, but also isn't too far from Taiwan. These two countries aren't exactly best buds, and if you add China to the mix, you have a potentially volatile combination right there. Will the major players pool their resources and start work on examining the Yonaguni Pyramid? Don't hold your breath. Or do, depending on whether you're underwater or not. Number 4. New Jersey Deep Sea Graveyard. In the state of New Jersey, there's a great mystery going on. It's been called the New Jersey Deep Sea Graveyard. It was first discovered in 1985 when a man named Paul Hepler started to map out the bottom of the New Jersey coast and came upon something unexpected: 2 large locomotives. Upon diving down, he found that they were Planet Class 222T models, which is a very rare model of train and one of the oldest models of steam trains that were ever made in the United States. Just as odd, these trains were perfectly upright, which almost makes one think that they were placed there intentionally. But whether that's the case is unclear. There have been multiple research dives to these trains, but all the results report the same thing. It's unclear how they got there. The popular theory is that they came off of a ship. But there's 2 problems with that theory. 1, there's no serious damage on the trains that would show something like that. And 2, the trains themselves were never reported as missing or lost. Number 3. The Barracuda Fish. The Barracuda fish, or Macropina microstoma, made headlines in 2021 with an intriguing and mysterious fact about its vision. From the outside, it looks like it has squinty little eyes, but in fact this couldn't be further from the truth. First, let's cover the basics. The Barracuda fish grows to 6 inches and lives around 2,600 feet below the surface in a place referred to as the Twilight Zone. It's called that because of the lack of sunlight. Not that the Barracuda isn't aware of sunlight. Actually, it proves crucial when it comes to catching a meal. Here's where its extraordinary eyesight comes in. You see, the tubular structures inside the fish's glass-like head weren't some crazy part of its brain. Those are its eyes. And they point upwards. Behind a shield packed with fluid, they stare toward the surface. And it's there they pick up stuff to munch on, because as prey swims overhead, it creates very noticeable shadows. Things get a little freaky once the Barracuda goes hunting, because the tubes can move to face forward. This fish literally has eyes in the back of its head. Number 2. Tahiti Twilight Zone. Speaking of the Twilight Zone, we return to that location for our next entry, and it takes place specifically in the warm and friendly climate of Tahiti. Reports from 2022 reveal that experts discovered something very cool down amongst the spongy and squidgy inhabitants of a fascinating underwater environment. Located up to 213 feet under the surface was a coral reef that proved a true eye-opener. What's described as many corals with a rose shape were seen, comprising one awesome deep-sea spectacle. These roses are approximately 6 feet wide and make up an epic reef believed to be 2 miles in length and 200 feet in width. To find such an incredible example in a place previously thought to be a little remote for so much coral to live and thrive is a game-changer for scientists. They have a mass of cool coral to study at a time when such environments are under threat. A golden opportunity to get up close and personal with a mysterious form of life. Number 1. EAMS Lift Hendrika. No matter how big and strong the boat, you just can't get around one simple fact. The ocean always wins. The ocean is so powerful it can sink even the mightiest of vessels. A case in point was the EAMS Lift Hendrika, a craft from the Netherlands. This was a relatively recent voyage that ended in disaster. We're used to hearing about seagoing tales where the crew needed to be rescued. This time, both the crew and the boat required urgent help. It all started when the ship was cruising through the North Sea traveling from Germany to Norway. The EAMS Lift Hendrika was transporting serious cargo, which reportedly included at least one other boat. Approximately 400 tons of oil and fuel were part of the deadly package. This was in 2021, just 6 years after the boat was constructed. The crew were in the middle of a nasty swell and they realized the sea could tip them over. Time being of the essence, they radioed for help. The boat was just 60 nautical miles from Norway when the drama started. There were 12 crew aboard who had to be rescued by helicopter. 4 of them weren't so lucky and had to take an impromptu swim to safety. Sounds like a truly hair-raising experience. Of course, once the people were safely away, there was the matter of what to do about the ship. It was on its own in turbulent conditions and in serious danger of hitting land. So the rescuers had to get things under control quickly, otherwise the expensive ship was going to be potentially damaged beyond repair. Not to mention the risk it posed to people on land, plus the environmental impact. They brought in not just one, but 2 tugs which guided the EAMS Lift Hendrika at the bow and stern. The vessel lived to cruise another day. Number 10. German U-boat. For over a century, a shockingly intact German U-boat has been resting in the mud on the bank of the River Medway in Kent, England. It's believed to be one of over 100 U-boats that were surrendered at the end of World War I. Most of the vehicles were scrapped and some were given to the French Navy. Nobody knows for sure how or why the lone wrecked submarine ended up where it is. Experts believe that it's a U-boat known as UB-122, which was among the surrendered group of vehicles. During the war, it would have carried as many as 10 torpedoes. It's possible that the tow line pulling the boat broke and that it was more trouble than it was worth to chase down. UB-122 is the only complete U-boat that has ever been found in British tidal waters, according to marine archaeologist Mark Dunkley, who spoke with Mail Online following the discovery. There are no plans to preserve it. Instead, it will remain in place as a reminder of the ultimate sacrifice that often comes with war. It's the only visible example of just 40 known U-boat wrecks that happened in British waters. The vehicle's visibility changes with the water levels, and it's gained an increasing amount of attention in recent years after being exposed by a series of harsh storms. Number 9. A frozen shelter. During World War I, Austro-Hungarian and Italian forces went head-to-head in a long, drawn-out battle known as the White War. The conflict took place in the Italian Alps, where 2/3 of the 150,000 deaths were caused by avalanches, frostbite, landslides, illness, and other effects of the brutal weather. One group of 20 Austro-Hungarian soldiers spent 3.5 years in a crude wooden shelter atop a 10,154-foot peak called Mount Scorluzzo. By the time the war ended in 1918, they were fed up with the cramped makeshift space and the unforgiving Alpine climate, which saw temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit. They abruptly closed and abandoned the shelter at the first opportunity and were so eager to get out of there that they left behind most of their personal belongings. The only people who visited the site before it became covered in snow and ice were some scrappers who were looking for metal to sell. Relics from the White War began appearing during the 1990s as climate change accelerated the melting of glaciers. Since then, an array of perfectly preserved artifacts have been discovered, including letters, diaries, weapons, and other items. The frozen bodies of soldiers have also been found. Researchers first visited the barracks on Mount Scorluzzo in 2017 after the ice that had encased it for nearly a century melted away. They found all kinds of things from food, dishes, bottles, animal skin jackets, straw mattresses, coins, helmets, ammunition, and more items reflecting the dismal daily lives of the men who languished there. This is just one of many similar shelters that have been discovered in recent decades, and there's a good chance that more will appear as global warming continues to dramatically alter the landscape. Number 8. A soldier's bedroom. Hubert Rochereau was barely an adult when he left his childhood home in central France to fight in World War I. He died in the conflict in 1918 at just 21 years old. The young man's heartbroken parents turned his bedroom into a permanent memorial, keeping it just as their son left it when he went off to war. They added a few items from Hubert's military service, including his helmet, medals, and jacket. His books, military manuals, pipe, cigarettes, pistol, knife, notebook, and other personal belongings were left in place along with his bed, desk, and other furniture. Hubert's parents closed the room off, ensuring that their beloved fallen son's memory would be preserved. In 1935, the couple bequeathed their home to a close military friend, General Eugène Brideau. The transfer of property was contingent upon Brideau agreeing to leave Hubert's room untouched for 500 years. But the new owner fled the country during World War II when he fell under suspicion as a Nazi collaborator and spent the rest of his life in Spain. The house fell back into the hands of Brideau's daughter, whose husband, Daniel Fabre, still lived there as of 2014. Local officials have stopped by to see Hubert's room, which the current owner has agreed to leave as is. But there's no guarantee that the next owner will do the same. In recent years, the local mayor has campaigned for measures that would ensure that the room is preserved. Number 7. Chemical weapons. While constructing a trail through Fort Totten Park in Washington, D.C. in 2020, workers from the National Park Service discovered an unexploded World War I-era shell. The agency immediately closed that section of the park and urged the public to stay away. Heavy rains had revealed the weapon, which the Army destroyed in a controlled detonation. Trail construction was put on hold while the Park Service investigated the bomb's possible origins and searched the soil for other weapons. The bomb may have come from the former American University Experiment Station, where the government carried out research and experiments on chemical agents, equipment, and munitions. Nicknamed the mother of all toxic dumps, the site once served as a dumping ground for chemical weapons. Between 2007 and 2010, the Army Corps of Engineers found over 500 munition items, 400 pounds of laboratory glassware, and 100 tons of contaminated soil at the property. The government condemned a home that had been built over the burial pits and settled a lawsuit with its understandably upset owners. Officials are still trying to figure out what to do about the recently discovered shell, which could reflect bigger problems regarding the presence of chemical weapons in the area. So far, soil tests have turned up no evidence of other explosives nearby, but politicians are nevertheless calling on numerous government agencies to meet and discuss the matter. What would you do if you found out your home was built over burial pits? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe before the end of the video. Number 6. Fallen soldiers. Over 150,000 soldiers died during the brutal White War, and sadly, many of their bodies were simply left to become buried in snow and ice. The fallen troops' remains have started to reappear in recent years as Alpine glaciers melt. In 2014, the mummified bodies of 2 blue-eyed Austro-Hungarian soldiers were found near the ski resort village of Pejo in northern Italy. The following year, a man named Livio De Francesco noticed a pair of boots poking out from the snow near the summit of a peak called Costa Bella in Val di Fassa. Based on the soldier's boots, ammunition, and a hand grenade found nearby, he was sure that the body belonged to an Italian soldier. The skeleton told the story of a healthy young man who was much taller than average, standing at nearly 6 feet. Speaking with local news outlet Corriere della Sera, De Francisco said that the soldier's tooth enamel was in excellent condition. He believes that the man died in 1915 as the Italians advanced on the region. The body had a shrapnel wound to the right shoulder blade and had been buried by nearly 5 feet of loose stone, possibly due to an explosion or storm. Costa Bella is littered with remnants of the bloody warfare that took place there over a century ago, including tunnels, rotten trench boards, and rust stains from barbed wire and shrapnel. And while the climate change we're currently experiencing is nothing short of catastrophic, it's helping to shed light on the harsh realities that soldiers endured during the war. Number 5. Long-lost submarine wreck. In late 2018, shifting sands along the northern coast of France revealed the rusted and haunting remains of a World War I-era German submarine. Known as UC-61, the vehicle ran aground in 1917 near the seaside commune of Ouessant. The crew deliberately flooded the vessel and abandoned it. Soon enough, it became buried in the sand. This actually wasn't the first time the submarine appeared. Speaking with the BBC, local mayor Bernard Braque said that the wreck emerges every 2 or 3 years depending on the tides. It's never visible for long before it's once again hidden beneath the seabed. But when it appeared in 2018, more of the vessel was visible than ever before, according to local tour guide Vincent Schmidt, who hoped that the wind and tides would expose even more of the submarine. UC-61 is thought to have sunk at least 11 Allied ships before it crashed while en route from Belgium to France to lay mines. Number 4. Ammunition and bombs. A Michigan family was cleaning out their house in Lansing last October when they discovered what appeared to be a live ammunition round. They called the authorities, and officers from the Michigan State Police Bomb Squad were dispatched to the site. The team performed an X-ray on the object and were relieved to find that it wasn't live. It appears as though someone used it as a piggy bank many years ago, filling it with antique coins and bills dating back to the 19th and early 20th centuries. The police announced the discovery on Twitter and shared photos of the goods, which include a $5 bill from 1928. The bomb squad took the round, but they were kind enough to leave the family with the treasures. Around the same time the non-live round was found in Michigan, someone in Perthshire, Scotland found an unexploded World War I bomb inside an old barn. The 18-pound shell had sat unnoticed for decades among farm equipment. Bomb disposal experts reported to the scene, and an army team was brought in from Edinburgh to safely dispose of the weapon. Nearby residents were forewarned of the plans, and thankfully, everything went smoothly. Number 3. Lost tank blueprint. The British-made Mark I tank was the first tank ever used in combat, and it proved to be a game-changer when it came to winning the First World War. It was designed in 1915 as a way to break the stalemate of trench warfare by enabling soldiers to traverse through craters and ram through barbed wire on the Western Front. When an enemy soldier saw the tank approaching for the first time, they reportedly shouted, "The devil is coming!" The tracked vehicle's blueprint was believed to be lost to history until recently, when auctioneer Paul Laidlaw announced that the only known copy will soon be sold at auction along with a 20-page patent description. The blueprint's value is estimated at over $27,000, and the patent description is worth around $13,600. Described as a lozenge-shaped vehicle propelled by an endless moving chain track, the Mark I tank was first used in 1916 in the Battle of the Somme. The only known surviving example is on display at the Tank Museum in Dorset, England. Naturally, if a blueprint were to exist, it would probably also be there, yet the museum doesn't have one. So it came as a huge surprise when Laidlaw received a call from a vendor who was looking to sell his copy. Speaking with Wales Online, the auctioneer said that the seller was unaware of the blueprint's value. The documents had been quietly handed down through the person's family for quite some time, which explains why nobody knew they existed. And it leaves us to wonder what other treasures are sitting in people's attics and storage rooms going completely unnoticed. Number 2. A mother's badge. An amateur metal detectorist named Philip Sarasi was treasure hunting on the Australian island of Tasmania last year when he found a World War I female relatives badge. The medal was given to the closest female relatives of soldiers, usually their wife or mother. Philip posted the discovery on social media, prompting another metal detectorist named Karen Campbell Davis to pore through archives in an attempt to identify the badge's owner. Using the number on the medal, she traced it to a single mother named Marion Craneswick, who lost 2 sons in the war. 20-year-old John Craneswick died in France in 1917 after a shell fragment struck his back. His brother, Thurston, was sent back to Australia to recover from a gunshot wound the following year, but died from tetanus. Karen spent hours tracking down the badge's owner and learning about the family. She told Wales Online that the experience left her feeling like she knew the Craneswicks personally. It's a tragic tale, and it left her wondering if Marion lost the medal or if she threw it away on purpose due to her grief. In a response to an inquiry about where to send her son's war medals, Marion wrote about how her husband had abandoned her 16 years earlier. She said she had no idea if he was still alive, and that it had been a long time since he helped support the family. The badge was returned to one of the woman's surviving grandsons. Number 1. Alpine refuge. Video footage that went viral last year shows a shelter embedded in a vertical rock face in Italy's Dolomite Mountains. Situated nearly 9,000 feet above sea level, the precariously positioned structure can only be accessed by traversing steep, rocky ridges. Only experienced hikers and climbers can safely get to the building, which consists of a blue slanted roof, brick walls, 2 doorways, and 4 windows. It's believed that Italian soldiers built the shelter after Italy declared war on Austria-Hungary in 1915. The structure would have been used as a refuge from the ongoing battles, as well as the harsh climate, which often saw temperatures well into the negatives. It's one of several World War I-era shelters that can be found among the Dolomites and is located along a via ferrata, or iron path, frequented by skilled climbers. Known as the Via Ferrata Ivano di Bona, the trail is equipped with steel ladders, rungs, and cables to help climbers get through the more difficult spots on the mountain. Only those fit enough to travel it are lucky enough to see the shelter firsthand. The rest of us can only experience it through pictures and videos taken by these adventurous explorers. Number 10. SS City of Adelaide. The passenger steamship SS City of Adelaide was launched from Glasgow, Scotland in 1863. It carried passengers between Sydney, Melbourne, and Honolulu and was later converted into a cargo vessel. The ship sailed for nearly 50 years before it was gutted by a fire in 1912. The fire lasted for several days. A resident of Australia's magnetic island named George Butler bought the burned vessel with plans to use it as a breakwater, but it ran aground in Cockle Bay while in transit to its destination. During World War II, a bomber struck one of the ship's masts during a training exercise, killing 3 members of the Royal Australian Air Force and 1 member of the U.S. Navy. To this day, the waterlogged vessel remains at the site where it crashed. The hull is in pieces after being battered by the elements. It's become deteriorated and overgrown with mangrove trees, which are genetically adapted to survive in unusual and challenging environments. Because it's located in a marine park, the wreck is protected from commercial fishers, allowing the mangroves to continue growing undisturbed as they take over what's left of the ship. Number 9. Capones Moonshine. Archaeologists were digging in an area known as Hell Hole Swamp outside Charlottesville, South Carolina last year when they stumbled upon a 1920s-era moonshine still, along with a garden hose, cinder blocks, and some scrap metal. The items were probably part of an illegal liquor distilling operation, according to the expedition's leader Catherine Parker, who spoke with the Post and Courier. Parker wrote on her website that the remnants of old distilleries are often mistaken for modern trash dumps, but there are certain features that set them apart to the trained eye, including the cinder blocks that were found at the site in Hell Hole Swamp. An architectural historian determined that they likely dated back to the 20s and functioned as a supporting platform for a submarine-style liquor still. If this is the case, then it means that hundreds of pounds of rye, barley, sugar, and water were brought to a boil in a metal container that was raised over a fire. The alcohol vapors would have been sucked out by a hose, turning back into a liquid in the process. This is just one of several stills throughout Hell Hole Swamp that archaeologists have connected to Benjamin Villepinto, a notorious bootlegger and associate of Al Capone. He owned property near the forest and worked closely with Capone to produce and smuggle booze out of South Carolina during the Prohibition era, according to Parker. Villepinto was killed during a shootout with a rival gang in 1926, but the stills remained in use for many years. In fact, they may have continued operating after alcohol became legal again due to the hefty $4 per gallon tax that the state imposed on legal liquor. Number 8. Gaza Airport. On September 13, 1993, Palestinian and Israeli authorities signed the first of a series of historic peace agreements known as the Oslo Accords. 5 years later, the Yasser Arafat International Airport opened, symbolizing the first tangible example of an independent Palestinian state. It was capable of handling around 700,000 passengers per year and served as the headquarters of the newly established Palestinian Airlines, which consisted of a Boeing 727 and 2 smaller planes. Sadly, the agreements in the Oslo Accords were short-lived. The parties failed to reach a true resolution to the seemingly endless conflict. Just 2 years after the airport opened, an uprising known as the Second Palestinian Intifada broke out, and flights were halted amid the rising tensions. The bloody violence dragged on for 5 long years as Palestinian suicide bombers struck Israeli targets. In 2001, 4 Israeli soldiers died in an attack. The Israeli military responded by bombing one of the airport's runways and destroying several of its buildings. As the conflicts continued over the following years, the airport was further damaged by Israeli bombs. No planes have taken off or landed at the property in over 2 decades, and the site has been stripped of valuable materials. There seems to be no foreseeable end to the violence between Israel and the Hamas government, who haven't engaged in discussions about the Gaza Strip since 2006. Number 7. Ancient Buddhist Temple. Archaeologists recently announced the discovery of a 2,000-year-old Buddhist temple in northwestern Pakistan's Swat Valley. Located in the town of Barracuda, the 2nd-century structure is believed to be one of the oldest Buddhist temples ever found in the country. At the time, the region was ruled by the Indo-Greek kingdom of northern India. It was built atop an earlier temple dating back to the 3rd century BC, within a few centuries of the founder of Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama's death. So far, the excavated remains measure over 10 feet tall. They consist of a cylindrical structure that sat atop a ceremonial platform and housed a Buddhist monument called a stupa. The complex was rebuilt several times and also contains a room for monks, a staircase, and a public courtyard that offered a view of an ancient road, among other features. Experts are still waiting for the radiocarbon dating results, but it's evident that the newly discovered temple is one of the Gandhara region's earliest Buddhist monuments. This, according to excavation leader Luca Maria Olivieri, who spoke with Live Science. Archaeologists began digging at Barracuda in 1984 as part of an ongoing effort to protect ruins from urban sprawl and to prevent artifacts from being sold in the illegal antiquities market. The land is mostly rented from private owners under agreements that allow the team to dig. But until recently, it was difficult to dig near the city center because the rental costs there are high. That all changed in 2019 when local archaeological authorities acquired some property near the city center, which is where the temple was found alongside an ancient road. The site also contained over 2,000 artifacts, including coins, jewels, seals, pottery fragments, stonework, and statues. Would you like to visit this temple in person? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Haludovo Palace Hotel. On the Croatian island of Krk, there's a crumbling abandoned hotel that could perhaps best be described as a decaying vintage sci-fi movie set. Built in 1971, the Haludovo Palace Hotel was a luxury destination for vacationers in what was then Yugoslavia. In many ways, the structure reflects the typical communist architecture of the time, especially when it comes to its monolithic qualities. Shortly after the hotel opened, Penthouse magazine founder Bob Guccione stepped into the picture and became an unlikely diplomat of sorts. In hopes of encouraging better relations between the US and Yugoslavia, he invested $45 million in the property, expanding it to include a penthouse casino. Of course, there was something in it for him: generous laws that allowed casino owners to withdraw money from the country tax-free. The ritzy resort attracted foreign tourists of high-ranking social status, including athletes, actors, and world leaders. But these glory days came to an abrupt end when war broke out in Yugoslavia in 1990. The war drove away the high-end clientele that the Haludovo Palace Hotel depended on to stay afloat. The business closed and became a shelter for refugees. It sat abandoned for years before Croatia gained its independence. By then it was decrepit and arguably beyond saving, but several owners nevertheless attempted to revive it. The final guests stayed at the Haludovo Palace Hotel in 2001. Skylights and windows are broken, the elevators are in disrepair, and the pool is empty and missing tiles. In addition to being an eyesore, the site is a safety hazard. Concrete is crumbling, metal fixtures are rusted and sharp, and chunks of broken glass are subject to fall onto someone at any given moment. It's unlikely that the Haludovo Palace Hotel will ever bounce back. The property is an utter disaster, and not to mention its fixtures and style are completely outdated and bizarre according to modern tastes. Most investors see the cost of fixing the place up as far more than it's worth. Number 5. Coco Palms Resort. The prestigious Coco Palms Resort on the Hawaiian island of Kauai became a hit among celebrities like Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra after opening its doors in 1953. It was built in place of a struggling 24-room lodge owned by Veda Hills, the widow of the late hotelier Alfred Hills. The 46-acre resort grew to include over 400 rooms under the ownership of hotel magnate Lyle Gus Guslander. Over the next 40 years, it continued to attract big-name guests and even some royals, including the Prince and Princess of Japan. It was featured in numerous movies, including Elvis Presley's Blue Hawaii, but the resort was shuttered in 1992 after sustaining serious damage from Hurricane Iniki in 1992. The Category 4 storm battered the hotel with 145-mile-per-hour winds, leaving it in disrepair. It fell even further into decay over the following decades as thieves gutted the property of anything valuable. On 2 separate occasions, it caught fire. Plants have made their way into the dilapidated buildings, which are on the brink of collapse from flood damage and caved-in roofs and staircases. Debris and dirt cover the site, which has allegedly become a hotbed for drug sales and other illegal activity, as well as a grazing area for cattle. Last year, following several attempts to sell and repurpose the property, Private Capital Group bought the resort for $22 million as the sole bidder in a foreclosure auction. The company had funded the previous owners, who failed to redevelop the property and fell more than $45 million in debt. At the time of the sale, Private Capital offered no clues regarding its plans for the defunct resort. But the company is free to recoup its money by selling the property, and a local nonprofit hopes to turn it into a park. Number 4. Ramheaded Sphinx. While digging at the ancient Gebel el-Silsila site near Aswan, Egypt in 2019, archaeologists discovered a ram-headed sandstone sphinx. Dating back more than 3,000 years, the 11.5-foot-tall monument was found in a pit of quarry debris that was dumped during the Roman era. It was left in an ancient carving workshop, perhaps as a cancelled order. The sphinx was probably carved during the reign of King Tut's grandfather, Pharaoh Amenhotep III. This and other sculptures may have been commissioned by the pharaoh and abandoned when he died. Known as the Cryo-Sphinx, it was found amid a collection of other artifacts including a carved cobra, a uraeus, which symbolized royalty, and a small baby sphinx which may have been carved as practice. A collapsed shrine dedicated to Amenhotep III was uncovered nearby. The pharaoh ruled from around 1390 to 1350 BC during Egypt's New Kingdom era. In addition to functioning as a quarry, Gebel el-Silsila was home to the quarry's workers and their families. The site contains a necropolis filled with the remains of men, women, and children, as well as the statues of wealthy officials. Archaeologists also found a watery soup of human remains inside an unlooted tomb. Number 3. Viaduct Petrobras. There's a massive elevated road that cuts through the middle of the rainforest in the Brazilian state of São Paulo before simply disappearing. Known as the Rio Santos Highway or the Viaduct Petrobras, it was built during the 1960s with plans to connect it to the existing BR-101 highway. But a last-minute change of plans linked the BR-101 to a coastal highway, and the Viaduct Petrobras was abandoned in its unfinished state. Measuring nearly 1,000 feet long and 131 feet tall, the gargantuan concrete structure is slowly being reclaimed by nature. This road to nowhere was part of the Brazilian government's ambitions to complete numerous massive projects, but there were problems with it from the beginning. Working conditions were torturous, and construction ground to a halt as the country descended into an economic crisis. The highway has sat abandoned ever since. It's become a popular bungee diving site among adventurous tourists who travel to the Salasopolis Caragua in Porto Novo before completing the rest of their journey on foot or by motorbike. Number 2. Tel Cabri Palace. Dating back to the 18th century BC, the Tel Cabri Palace in northern Israel once served as the population's political center. The sprawling 65,000 square foot Canaanite complex is larger than a modern-day shopping mall. It boasted an elegant banquet hall, fancy wall paintings, and storage rooms filled with over 100 jars of spiced wine. For reasons that have long stumped archaeologists, the palace was abruptly abandoned shortly after undergoing renovations and remained empty for roughly 1,000 years. Since the structure is in a tectonically active region, it made sense to connect the site's desertion to an earthquake, but experts hesitated to assign blame. They got closer to an explanation as the excavation progressed, ruling out drought, flood, fire, weapons, violence, and other causes along the way. After years of investigating, it became apparent that an earthquake was the most likely culprit after all. What seemed at first like a deliberately cut trench running through the palace turned out to be earthquake damage. Offset walls, wavy floors filled with pockmarks, and other damage further supported the idea that an earthquake destroyed Tel Cabri Palace. Sediments covering the floor told the story of a sudden catastrophic event, rather than decay that occurred slowly over time. This is concerning for modern residents who live along a fault line that is not considered to be active, but which might actually be if it had anything to do with the palace's destruction. Number 1. Ancient coins. In 2018, archaeologists found a soapstone jar filled with over 300 Roman Imperial-era coins and a golden bar while excavating the Cresoni Theatre north of Milan in Como, Italy. Whoever left the jar deposited it in such a way that they'd be able to quickly and easily retrieve it, according to rare coin expert Maria Garcia Facchinetti. She further explained that the coins were stacked in rolls much like those seen in modern banks, leading the team to believe that the owner was likely a public bank or institution. The coins date back to sometime before 474 AD and feature the emperors Honorius, Valentinian III, Leon I, Antonio, and Livio Severo. Experts hesitated to place a modern-day value on the hoard, but some estimated that it could be worth millions of dollars. Opened in 1807, the Cresoni Theatre was eventually converted into a cinema before ultimately closing in 1997. Numerous Roman artifacts have turned up at the nearby Novum Comum Forum area, making the gold coin discovery surprising yet not completely unexpected. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about incredible abandoned objects, let us know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe. We'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.